You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
From kitchen chaos to well-oiled machines, get ready for newfangled technology and old-school know-how. Stories and a good bit of fun. I'm Simon, and this is Culinary Mechanic. Joining me today is Christopher McFadden of the McFadden Group. Christopher, welcome to Culinary Mechanic.
Simon, thank you for having me, sir. This is great.
Yeah, man.
How's your day?
After we got to hang out in Vegas at the Bar and Restaurant Expo, it seemed like a very logical next step for you to come on and for us to have a good chat. So here we go. Let's press on the gas and say, how'd you get into the industry or next to hospitality, or how did it all start?
Well, it's funny. My first job was at a golf course, 12 years old, as a yogi, cleaning members' clubs and getting to know relationships with people. At 14, I got into retail and loved it. I was in sports shoe stores for my whole teenage career. And it's funny, I guess I knew how to sell because at 15 years old and working 9 hours a week at Athletes World Shoe Store, which was like a Foot Locker, I was #1 salesman in Canada for sales per hour at 15. And it's funny because I've always hated the word salesman because I feel like it always tags towards the car salesman mentality. And then at 18, I saw my girlfriend was working in restaurants, and I'm like, that seems like a route to go. So at 18 years old, which was in 1998, I started as a host at Eastside Mario's up here in Canada, in Burlington, Ontario. I got into being a server, and then ended up in Lake Louise at the Chateau Lake Louise, as Fairmont and Canadian Pacific had just became one brand. And at 20 years old, I fell in love with wine working at the Wallischer Stube Swiss Fondue restaurant in Lake Louise. And at 20 years old, I started my sommelier studies and knew I was going to say no to traditional university and traditional college, and that I was going to build wine programs in Canada. And that was my goal. And just before I was 24, I got my sommelier diploma and had an amazing life in the industry, running restaurants. And again, to get a wine program in a restaurant, you need to learn how to run the restaurant first because you can't just be the sommelier. And I had a very lucky good fortune of being in Calgary and in Banff, and that's where I really started to groom my life in the business, and knowing that running rooms and running restaurants and creating relationships with guests was going to be what I did. And having a knack for the food and wine world was exactly what my passion and heart was in. I did it for 25 years until about 3 years ago. I went through my own battle with kind of happiness and found myself in the depression world, and knew that I had to really come out of it for myself because through COVID, I kept taking care of my team and forgetting to take care of myself first. And this was after we had decided that guests were going to come after the team. And so this drive went into a totally different world. And I started writing my own programs and my own courses, and went into the professor world for a couple of years. And the McFadden Group has been now out for just almost 3 years now. And I had gone from leadership positionally to now leadership actionably, to focus on career coaching for everybody in the business. So I love this industry. I think it's the greatest thing that exists out there. And my entire drive and passion is making people find happier moments within themselves to really drive them to want to go to work rather than have to go to work, and just love what they do.
Awesome.
It's been a while.
Right off the top, you hit something for me. I've been saying this a lot. Like, we get to go to work. We don't have to go to work, because you don't have to. There's choices everywhere, right?
That's exactly it, right? And I think people, it's that, I gotta go to work today. I'm like, I get it. So do I. Like, the mindset of, the having to. And I had a client recently that was in that tough moment, and I said, work-life balance is such an avid conversation that we keep bringing up, but what if we were to flop those two words and make it life-work balance? Like, when you wake up, do the day for you before you do the day for others. So if you get yourself in the mindset of, hey, I get to go to work today, that's a huge blessing in the world that we're in. But because you want to go to work for you instead of having to go to work for others, I think shifts the perspective when you're leaving your house for the day.
Yeah, I mean, uh, the balance thing. I don't know if I've ever been balanced, to be perfectly honest with you, but For
I
me,
get it.
the whole work and life thing, I kind of figure it just has to be in harmony, right? Like I know personally that there are times when you got to get down and get it, right? You gotta like go after whatever is in front of you because that needs to be taken care of. And there's other times to like cruise a little bit and maybe a little bit of cruise control, but I think that uh, for me it's knowing when to go hard and when to recover. And if those things are in alignment, right? From
Mm.
from communicating with your partner to whatever, right? Making sure the dog gets it. Those
Yeah,
that's
that's
going to be
right.
a harmonious thing
Yep.
versus um believing that you're ever going to find it to be balanced because I don't know, this industry just doesn't really do that. At least that's
Well, I
that's
think
my
harmony.
my take on it.
I think it's great. Harmony is such a great word because as you said that, I'm thinking about those nights when you crush 300 covers seamlessly because everybody was on the mark. And it was one of those things that I used to stand back and there was certain music that came on at a restaurant that I was a GM at and partner at that there was a certain song that would come on nightly that it would tend to time itself exactly when we were in the thick of it, and I would
Yeah.
just step back for a moment and watch, and everything would go silent except for that song and me watching the magic of what we were creating and the spark that exists within that. Right, is that balance? No, that's harmony. That's exactly it. Right,
I
it's those
call that
moments,
the eye of the hurricane.
and nobody has any idea, right? I used to make a joke, and I said this recently on a spot that I was doing, and I said that difference of people that haven't been in this industry, and again, I look at hospitality much more openly than just the food and beverage side of it. Is that it's the
Right.
gesture of what we do with people and something that we provide in everything that we do, and
Right.
but some people just don't see it because they've never been in this environment that I
Right.
would just I called them the general public, and that there was a sincerity that existed with that because this was our chance to glow for people that didn't know how much work went into what we created, but
Yeah.
understood how much went into us making it happen. And I think there's such a genuineness of making, and I remind everybody that I've worked with, I remind students, I remind clients, is that we like to go out too.
Right.
What do we expect? And not what do we expect because we've done it professionally, but what do we just expect in going out with our family and going out with our friends and having an experience that we go, that was pretty cool. And then having a chance
Yeah.
to bring it with us. COVID was a
Yeah.
huge light with this. So when we saw my wife and I had gone out for dinner to one of the corporate companies in Vancouver and trying to see how doing something was going to happen based upon the fact that none of us knew what we were doing. And I was watching, a corporate beast, and I was like, I get okay, okay, and then how can we make it our own, and what can we do to, not level them up to compete, but how can we bring, more imagination to this idea of people's safety? And yeah, I'll tell you, when we started putting our people first, it allowed us to become more successful in what we were doing as a brand, because we had more guests because we had the same team coming back, and people were like, "They're back," and I was like, 100%, because the difference is that they
Yeah.
felt safe. So I think this
Yep.
environment that we create and the speed bumps and walls that we've hit in the last few years of how to keep afloat, and for those that were able to, and those maybe that weren't, that maybe have been able to make a comeback. um,
Right.
yeah, harmony's an important word. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Life worth living.
It's funny you talk about we all talk about hospitality, and I think that one of the things I've been challenging some of my clients to do is stop and we all like we're mapping customer journeys and we're all looking at touch points, right? Like that's normal stuff nowadays. Thank you, Will Guidara. You know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um,
Full prop.
but like I've been challenging people to not only like look forward, look out, look to the guest, but then turn around and like how how are you greeting your people in the morning when they walk in or when you walk in? How are you how are the touch points of our employees, right? How are we leading those people? Because there's such a disconnect. Even great ones, even great leaders. there's the way we treat the public, the way we treat our guests, the way we treat the money coming in versus the way we treat the people who we pay. And somehow, like I can't even say, oh, I do it. No, I have to stop and think about this every day about how did I used to treat people? How can we treat people? Because like if it's not every day, it's once a week for me that I run into someone and they go, 4 years after COVID has subsided, I still am struggling with staffing and I still can't quite. And I'm like, how do you treat people? How do your people feel when they're in your building? Right? So for me, the hospitality has to
You,
be in every single direction because if you don't nail it, you're gonna keep the same like level of turnover that you've seen for years, right? The culture has to get better.
yeah, yeah. Well, hospitality, like hospitable to a guest is great. Hospitable to your staff is even better. Your
Right?
staff will sell more things if they care, and if they're
Oh,
doing it
never
for
mind.
somebody,
You're talking now, so you're still talking about guest facing. I'm
right?
talking
Like,
about the boys and girls in the back.
no, no, no,
I'm
no. But the difference between, it's funny. We had guests, and we had an open kitchen at Pivo Restaurant, amazing, right? But watching that and trying to, their smiles meant everything back there,
totally.
right? Because
Yeah.
the entire environment is what we're doing, right? Is that there's going to be more quality coming out of everything when people are excited about the fact that they're cared about. And I think that's where I was trying to, and I should have made that as a sync as everybody as a whole and not just the guest focus, right? But you've got better quality product going out because the people's attention is more intentional because
Right.
of just loving to come in. What a cool moment, Hey, team, how are
Right.
you doing? I made a, a confident joke when I was 14 years old, starting at Athletes World. And I had applied to this retail shop. It had TVs, it had a basketball court in the backyard, in the back of it, and I was like, "This is the place that I want to work." And for a year, I applied to Athletes World 9 times, but they couldn't hire me at 13. At the time, it was when I turned 14, I could get a social insurance number. Um, and and I remember my first day of work thinking that I was best friends with the GM who had gotten to know me over the year. And I walked in, I was like, "Hey, Punk, how's it going?" He's like, "Pardon me?" He's like, "Start again." And I was like, he's like, "I'm not your friend, I'm your boss." And I'm like, "Got it. Got it." I almost lost the first job I ever had based upon a comfortableness that I had. And I think in today's world is that it's, especially with the old guards that are in the business still, right, is that there's still an autocraticness to all of us out there. And that has to exist when we're running the financials. But when we become more of that servant leadership and that there's leadership all around you in every role that exists in every age group that exists within it, and you're leading from the top as the chef or as the director, as the GM, whatever it may be, but everybody else is pertaining to that same leadership style because you're exuding it. Build better leaders from the start
Yeah.
and have them walk in
Yeah.
and know that you're paying attention to them. I used to do goal setting stuff. I was like, "Hey, tell me your goals in the next 3, 6, and 9 months. We'll meet next week." But what they didn't know is that I had my own goals for them. And when we sat down and had a
Right.
chat about it, I'm like, "Okay, so tell me yours," right? And I was like, "Okay, well, these are mine for you." And they're like, "What? I didn't know you were going to do this." And they got nervous. I'm like, "But then it would be irresponsible if I didn't." And the next thing, some of them would be like, "Well, can I go and rewrite mine? You can do whatever you want, right? But if that inspired you, fantastic, right? But I have to care as much about you walking in the door as a guest walking in the door because if I don't have you, I don't have the guests, and if I don't have a team that's not just one person cooking because everybody else was like, "I can't do this anymore." Well, then we've gotten it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's pause for a second. If you're serious about building a kitchen that leads from the top, runs on systems, and actually feels good to work in, make sure you're following Culinary Mechanic. This show is all about helping you lead better, scale smarter, and stop white knuckling your business. And if you're ready to dig in deeper, you'll find a link in the show notes to connect with me directly. So, just this morning, I was having a conversation with a recruiter, and he's based in the middle of the country somewhere. And uh, I said, "So, like, here's what I do." I told him about Culinary Mechanic, and he's like, "Cool." I said, "Tell me what you're seeing." And he goes, "Well, I'm seeing that hotels are running with fewer managers. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, what about the restaurant side? Because that's really where that's my comfort zone, right? I like restaurants. And he goes, okay. And he goes, well, I'm seeing this amazing thing. Like more and more people are getting excited about top level, high echelon chefs. And I was like, I bet. And I said, um, what about like, what about the group that is the fresh ones that are just becoming chefs or they're sous chefs trying to get the chefs? He goes, funny, I hadn't really thought about it. I said, what do you mean? He goes, those folks are like almost non-existent. He goes, I'm either like seeing really well high developed chefs that are like heading for Michelin stars and James Beard awards, or really, really like way, way down, but there's the middle ground. And I said, what are your thoughts on that? And he goes, I think that so many people have decided what they want out of their career
Mm.
that they're going for that and they're forgetting to build and develop around them. And it hurts my
Yeah.
feelings. It really does. It's like, wait, it's all about me. I'm gonna go just get my career. What about like how like that's actually the hard way, right? Like think about that.
Yes,
That's
very
the
much so.
hard way to do business.
Very much so.
For me,
Yeah.
like my biggest successes in restaurants or when I will take the time to like teach and train and develop and bring people along with me because then I could direct and I could like kind of not stand on their shoulders so much as be at that level to help them learn to take my job from me at some point, right? But that's when I did that's
100%.
when my operations went the best, the easiest. And people looked at me and like, wow, this is amazing. Everybody's so calm and cool. And I'm like, it's because they know what they're supposed to do. Like they
Yeah,
know
totally different.
all the pieces. But
Yeah,
it's
as a small
we've forgotten as a culture. And I think and I will say that this may be small-minded of me, but I think it's Americans because I look at a lot of the European chefs and they're developing people. The European restaurant culture is really about leadership and development and passing things down, right?
Well, I think it's a
Um,
coaching mentality too that's happening more so now, where it's, we have coaches on all these sports teams and event teams, and well, why aren't we coaching? Why aren't we just coaching in restaurants instead of that worry of, "Ah, my boss told me to do this." Well, no, your chef, right, who's your coach, right, is guiding you to develop you to do
but
this.
they're not.
Everyone, right, and we're not, right. Edwin Kumar and I had this great restaurant group, a part of our restaurant leadership 101 course. And there was a young man who had moved here from the Philippines with his family when he was 14, got a job at this restaurant as a dishwasher when he was 15. And it came up in conversations as we were doing breakout room discussions. And I said, "How old are you, out of curiosity?" He goes, "I'm 22." He goes, "I started the restaurant when I was 15 as a dishwasher, and now I just officially got my first CDP title." And the pride that he carried was so obviously beautiful because
Correct.
he loved what he did, because he grew into what he was doing, knowing what he wanted to do, and he went after it. And he pushed hard, and he's going to be a chef and corporate chef one day if he wanted to in this company,
Right.
because his drive and tenacity are everything hospitality. And my friend and I
Right.
went in there for dinner one night, and he was one of the first to come out to say hi. And he's like, "I just want to say thanks. What a great course!" Like, and it's so nice when you see this younger generation, and I think it existed for us. I'm in my mid to late 40s now, and there was a certain wowness to lining tables up with a string so they were dead straight and doing things
Yeah.
with perfection, tension, and grace. And now that I've seen such a visual learning capacity for people, because everybody's just on their phones now, was that I had to start showing people why rather than just telling them why. And the
Yep.
difference and impact that it made when I realized that I was setting our dining room table when we had guests over at 10 years old flawlessly because I was obsessed with the idea of it. I guess that's where it all stemmed from. But it was
Right.
always this, let's make ourselves grow as much as understanding the next generations that are trying to get into this business, that think a little bit more new age. There's more technology, there's more things that are catching their
Right.
attention. Let's build that spirit at that level for them to know that they're heard, And a little bit of ingenuity is always a good thing, especially for some of us more senior, if you will, in the business.
And I got a few years on you, honestly, but um, I I think that for me, a lot of it is calling people back to like, hey, like pass it down, right? Like take the knowledge you have and pass it along and teach because it holds two major functions for me. Number one, it's going to make your own job easier. If everybody around you is well educated in the core of what it is you're looking to accomplish, whether that's great food and service, whether that's fast, whatever that may be, if everybody really has a phenomenal understanding of it, it's gonna go
Oh
easier.
yeah,
So it's self-serving, right? But at
absolutely.
the
Well, you
same
had that as a
time,
smaller. Sorry, my apologies.
uh, that's okay. It's yeah, it's one of those things where it's like this is self-serving, but at the same time, like if you want to perpetuate it, right? If you want to grow your business, the next group behind you needs to be able to understand not only what you're doing, how you're doing, why you're doing it, but how to teach it well. And I think that
Yeah,
that's a lost art. Teaching how you want people to teach.
that's a great that's a great sentiment. Yeah, you know what? And it's funny because I think, and again, learning more of the old school way of just yes, boss. Okay, that's what we do. Got it. Right. And very, very French and British style old school service now being brought into the newer world of things. And but that's how it was done. And learning that, but now translating it differently to today's times is an important factor completely. It was like being a
Yeah.
sommelier and trying to people, everybody gets nervous tasting or smelling wine when they're beside a sommelier. And I'm like, but your nose and your palate are yours. I may
Yeah.
know what the rain looked like that year in Sancerre, and that's great. When I'm, but a guest doesn't even care about that. It just makes me understand things at a different level.
Yeah.
However, the translation between you being able to provide the perfect glass of wine for a guest experience, it doesn't have to be about you coming to ask me. It has to be about you learning how to think it out and
Yeah.
and bring up the idea that you smell cinnamon when we're in the open nose and tasting that we're doing on it because maybe I didn't see it and maybe now you've sparked my interest to go, yeah, it's there, maybe we can look at it with this dish, and then hopefully that they go or this one, and I'm like, great, now we've got the conversation begun. I used to do this where I would bring in fall, I brought in a whole bunch of autumn leaves off trees that had just fallen, and I brought them in and I would open up Sangiovese for the staff for Chianti. And I'm like, smell the leaves, smell the wine. And they're like, oh. And I was like,
Yeah.
now let's put the conversation into loop. We're not doing anything with leaves in the restaurant, but what dishes in the restaurant have those kind of tones to it that allow this? And it was a neat
That's a
moment
great
of just,
that's awesome. I love it.
and I think visual components are a huge aspect of things. But yeah, if we're not teaching to grow, it just doesn't work.
Well, just back up one step. If you're not teaching, are you growing?
No.
I
No,
mean,
no,
I mean,
no, no, no,
like
no, no, not at all.
that's where I'm at with leadership right now, right? Like, uh, and like
That's awesome.
you do leadership. Half a dozen guys and gals that you and I know, or a dozen, do leadership. And for me, the real kicker is so many people are like, oh, leadership, that's up here. I'm like, leadership's right in it. Like it's how
Well,
we
that's
interact. It's the communication. It doesn't have everybody thinks leadership and then they go John Maxwell or you know what I mean? They go billion-dollar companies. I'm like, no. Leadership is about how we take care of each other and
that's
how
it. And
it's
it,
really I to people that don't understand, I actually had someone say this to me. They're like, Simon, what the fuck does leadership mean? And I said, well, I'll give it to you the way I think about it. And he's like, okay. I said, expansion of influence. He's like, cool. What else? I'm like, no, right there. Expansion of influence.
dynamite, dynamite.
Whole full stop.
Well, and this was my reality. Right? that, we had an amazing success with Restaurant Leadership 101. We were doing restaurants across the country. We touched base in the States and overseas with Andy Jones in the UK. And it was neat where McFadden Group was bloomed from that not being the 16-hour course that we had, but if there was moments in people's leadership that they really needed help with. And it was last summer that, and I was doing, good with one-to-one coaching. And then last summer, I had a lot of students come up to me and just said, "We're stuck. I've got my degree from back home. I'm doing my postgraduate degree here. You're my professor here, but there's this gap that I can't seem to understand on where I need to get to next." So I started working with students that became clients, but I started pivoting what I was doing and how I was developing them. And I had 9 students that became just kind of pseudo clients as I was teaching them, but outside of class time. And the moments that happened was that, this is the gig that I want. This is what I'm going after. I was like, great, let's see if it makes any sense to you. Let's just pull more out of you to see if it aligns with who you actually are, who you think you are, but let's see if we can pull more out. And by the end of it, all 9 students either got the gig that they were going after because it made sense, understood where their direction was going, or knew what they had to go to instead. And as I had said this out loud to my buddy Edwin Kumar from Ultra Team Development, and we did Restaurant Leadership 101, I had a friend of mine here go, so what is it exactly you do? And I said, it's executive coaching for restaurants. And as I had told this to Edwin, and Edwin's an incredible coach, he goes, hold on a second. And he goes, do you realize that you're doing career coaching? And he goes, you've been studying leadership and gotten certifications and coaching certifications and licenses in emotional intelligence and leadership. He goes, but you're doing it for everybody else too. And I said, oh. I said, well, yeah. I said, yeah. Like, it just very confidently out loud, I said in a conversation, I said, I get more excited. And I said this a couple times lately in just conversations, is taking somebody from here and building the steps to get here rather than convincing somebody to go from here to here. And I said, leadership is an action. As much as we hold it accountable in a position, leadership's actionable. So if the 17-year-old hostess that I had at Piva can run my door at 17 because I trust her fully because she's leading it, what's there's nothing wrong with that, because she's next to start growing herself because I paid attention to her leadership capabilities at a junior role in the restaurant that became a senior role in the restaurant at 17 years old. So I believe leadership is actionable, right? It has to be positional, 100%, but I believe it's an actionable thing, in that if the person at the top isn't leading and all of a sudden you've got an entire team that's leading and the leader at the top isn't really understanding why they're all happy, well, because we've helped them figure out more about what makes them great at what they do and love what they do. And then if it can build up as much as it can go from top down and we can go from bottom up, how much better and stronger we're going to be.
Yeah. One of the things that I've that just keeps coming back is every time I start, and it's actually changed. It has actually changed the way I start with my clients, my chefs. Is I used to start and look at like communication and leadership and kind of the bigger picture things, and I just now recently said, okay, we're gonna start with time management. We're gonna get you understanding where your time has been going and where you want it to go, right?
Awesome.
Because once you do that, you can then go, I'm doing these 10 things and they're really low value to me, right? And you can put them on any matrix you want. I happen to use urgent and important. And if you start to realize that you're doing all this work that isn't very urgent and it's kind of important, but not really, you just need to teach somebody how to do that. Like, so I started them with time management, and I get them, and they're like, "Why am I doing?" One guy says, "Why am I doing this?" And I was like, "Because until you understand how to lead yourself, I don't expect you to be able to lead anybody else for shit." And he's like,
That's huge.
he's like, "Oh, okay." And he dug in. And I'm like, gotcha. Okay, cool. Here we go. But it's true.
Amazing.
It's like until people can like understand where their time is going. I got this one guy and I said, I want you to map out a day and then maybe your whole week and tell me. And
Oh,
he's like, this weird thing is happening. I said, what's that? He goes, I think that there's all this free time, but I never seem to get anything done in that. I'm like, so then pay attention to what's happening in that free
oh,
time. He's like, I'm getting sucked in here and getting sucked in there. I'm like, okay, you want a solution for that? He says, yeah. I said, great. Do you have pockets in your shirts? He goes, every day. Like, okay, cool. I want you to fold a piece of paper and I want you to put it in your pocket. And on the front, I want you to, as you're going through the day, list what you're doing. And if you're able, if you have the capacity, write down how much time you spend on that. And then every time you're going, man, I'm doing this again, I want you to turn the piece of paper around to the back and I want you to write the word teach. And then I want you to write what it is that you just keep having to go back to. And he's like, why? I said, because if you're going back to that shit and it's not really great work for you, if it's not high value, it's not moving the business forward, then I want you to teach somebody else how to do it. And he went, nobody's ever said that kind of thing to me before. And I said, well,
that's
I said, maybe that's why I have a job.
there
Maybe
you
that's
go.
what,
Well, it's like the infamous Denzel Washington line is that don't confuse movement with progress,
uh,
right? Very simply, right? And what that looks like. But what an awesome thought to have somebody do.
yeah.
Where
And then
last
we
week I had,
design their ideal week. And then,
yeah,
or let's see, who is it? It's Hyatt. Not John Hyatt. That's the singer. Um, I don't know. Michael Hyatt. There it is. He's the guy that does the ideal week and he's got his like planner and all that. And then there's Dan Martell and he's got a perfect week. Everybody's got some kind of concept of it. For me, I kind of go with ideal week because like it's aspirational. You know, like
well,
it's not
yeah,
going to happen every time, right? But you
no,
gotta, for me, it is the difference between driving from point A to point B as fast as possible. It's on the map, right? I'm going on the map versus I don't have a plan and I don't have a lot of direction and I'm in the desert and I'm just doing donuts. Right?
well,
Going
I have to,
fast. I'm going
yeah.
fast, but I'm not going anywhere.
Well, it's funny because I get to a moment I'm I'm solidly good, and then I take moments in my week where I'm like, I'm not going to do a whole bunch of bullet point notes of what I need to accomplish because I just don't want to think those out yet. Then I regret not doing that. But I like seeing validity in a day. I like seeing something start and end. So I
Yep.
always check off, my list. But I always make it modestly put together so that I don't overextend myself to exhaustion. Or all of a sudden I wake up on Thursday, I'm like, my entire week's done. What am I gonna do for the next 2 days? And then so I try to very much portion it out to make it responsibly confident and just methodical for myself and for everything that I'm doing better for my business and for others and with
Yeah.
others, most importantly. So it got to a point where I would get down to looking at it quickly at the end of the day, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to email so and so, and I'll change it. So to go in from going in the anxiety moment of I got to get up and do it, I just quickly reword it to remind yourself on, let's say it's Tuesday, remind yourself on Tuesday to email so and so on Wednesday instead of emailing so and so when I was in Tuesday. And just that shift of mindset allowed me to put my phone away, check mark it off, and have a complete list of completion for the day.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw
Yeah.
in like middle of the day things. Like last week, I had crushed 8 significant things, went and mowed my grass, came back in, changed what I was doing to another thing that I had to do. And then in the middle of that, to break between the next thing is I went and power washed my deck just to
There
shift
you
my
go.
mindset in the day to have some flow. But I love watching, accomplishments in a day and feeling proud of what's been accomplished. Um, and what's been a challenge and maybe what I could do better the next time, but working myself and coaching myself through it for
Yeah.
my own growth, which is the most important growth that exists for myself, and same for you, right, and
Well,
everybody else. So,
have you like you were in restaurants for a long time, same way I was. The biggest shift for me has been your like daily routine used to be dictated to you, right? You go to work at a certain
Mhm.
time, doors open. At that time, every day, And if you close
Yeah.
for lunch, doors shut. If you open for dinner, doors open. Like your cues are built in, right? So even when I was doing multi-unit work, I had 3, 4 restaurants. I had a couple months with 7 restaurants. Those were bad months, but the 4 restaurant unit months were pretty good. But it was like they was still dictated, right? Like I would find myself getting through lunch and going, all right, I'm gonna hop in the car and I'm gonna get over here. I'm gonna talk to this chef, and then he's gonna have an hour before we get open. So all the daily cues were built in, and then learning to be in a free floating space that is advisory consultant work working from home. I'm like, oh God. And so I had to really like personally focus myself. And it's a work in progress for sure. But I definitely
Why?
like, but it's helping me to understand. It's like, okay, how did I succeed as a chef that was in one restaurant? Like, wow, it was because I used to map my time was really well mapped and I knew exactly when I had an hour. And so, like if I know I have an hour to work on something, or if I know that a chef has an hour to work on something, I tell them like guard that like it is fucking gold, man. Like communicate to your team, you're out. Like you have 1 hour to get a project done. I don't know, put a note on your door that says taping in progress or do not disturb or whatever you need to do on your office door or here's my favorite one. You got a project to do? Tell everybody that you're out of the building for 1 hour. Grab your laptop, grab your pen and paper, whatever it is, and walk down the street to Starbucks or a coffee shop and work there. And someone said, "But I'm supposed to be in the restaurant." I'm like, nobody's going to miss your presence if you do your due diligence, right? Set your team up. Hopefully you have a sous chef or the manager can watch your team for an hour while you're in the middle of the day. Get out and like make no excuses. Go do the thing, and then come back and you'll go, "Oh, I got my project done," right? Because as chefs and restaurant managers, we are so focused on all the team and all the other things, but we still got to take care of our own deliverables, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh,
Right. And as a sommelier, right? I mean, the distraction of tasting wine through a day, right? Like, and I
schedule
keep
it.
being
That's
able
what I tell them. I'm like, make an appointment, make a meeting with yourself,
to,
or
and
make
then
a
it became
meeting
a
with other
where I
people
realized that it
that
was,
says chef out of building. Because we
simple as
have these
that,
cool
right?
little things,
I'm
right?
on
We got
break.
the
Yeah.
phones. Yeah.
Well, when we did it though, I had a pager and that was awesome. And then a set of quarters in my mom's ashtray in her car that I was like, okay, I got to find a payphone. Oh, the days, eh?
The only thing that was good about those things, and I still have to remember, and my wife reminds me of this on a regular basis. Just because somebody's calling you does not mean that you have to answer it. Just because somebody's texting you does not mean right? Like communication is two ways. You have a choice, that because when we first got together, I was like the phone would ring and I'd jump over the couch and like go to get the phone and she's like, just because it rings doesn't mean you have to answer it. That's what call screening
I
is.
like,
And I went,
I like that too. You know what's
oh,
interesting is
I
that
know.
I've never had a passcode on my phone or face. Like I've just whatever. I was a BlackBerry guy. This is I think my second or third iPhone that I have. But I was a BlackBerry guy. I loved it. I loved in the simplicity of it. But when I was in Calgary in 2006 to 2009, I never had a cell phone. It was either I was either at work, call me there because it was 12 or 13
Right.
hour days. Or I was at home, and if you can't get me at either of those places, call my wife's cell phone, and you'll probably get a hold of me. But the shift that's happened with all of this, so I think the intensity of the phone ringing. So I put on, I had an app that required to have a passcode. So I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to keep the app for a bit. So I put the face on. I sound like such an old man with this. I can build your POS systems and your inventory programs in restaurants flawlessly. Telling you how my iPhone works, not a clue. So I put this on, and one thing that I didn't know, and the other day I was like, why are messages showing that I have a message, but it doesn't say anything with it? And I realized it's not showing it because it's got a passcode to protect that from just showing in general scope. That
Right.
has shifted. That has shifted how I pick up my phone. I've shut vibrate off, right? I can see my phone go and I can peek at who it is, but I don't have to read what it is. because it'll just say,
Oh,
my wife's nickname is Spud because she's from Prince Edward Island and they're the potato country of our country, or of our, yeah, the potato country of our country. So I nicknamed her Spud when we met 20 years ago. So, but I just see Spud McFadden messages. I'm like, great, great. I know it's probably not an emergency because she would have called, right? Whatever it may be, but it changes how I look at my phone now because I don't know what it is I'm about to read, and it's
interesting.
changed how much I pick it up based
I
upon the fact that if
turn
it's
90% of notifications off.
only notifications that I have are text, email, and LinkedIn. Other than that, I don't have anything else up.
No, I've
So if I
turned
see a
those.
LinkedIn message, like it's not important to grab, right? Like it's okay, it can wait.
I see texts. I've turned LinkedIn off. Uh, I know I get LinkedIn notifications, but they just go to the top little bar thing. No,
Yeah,
but there's no buzzing, there's no visual thing. It'll send me a little icon, but that's it.
okay,
And
yeah,
that way, because that way I can, because otherwise I'm just too much of a squirrel. I'm like, oh, ooh, ah. Like, nope. If you want me, text me, and I'll
yeah,
get
yeah,
right
yeah.
back to you, maybe.
Maybe, or sometime, yeah.
Or I'll get back to you, but it's going to be a little while. I tell my clients, I'm like, if you need me, text me twice in a row. Like text me and then text me again, and I'm likely to pick it up and go, okay, I got you, and I'll be right back to you within 2 minutes. And if it's urgent, I'll
I
call you right back.
had a new
But other than
client that
that,
was
I
like,
don't.
yeah,
I
what's the easiest way to get a
refuse.
hold of you? Like, should I email you? Should I LinkedIn message? I'm like, you can just text. I share my phone number on LinkedIn and on my business, like on my signature. That's not like just text, right? Make it easier, right? Instead of this going through things, because I don't want to look at my emails all the time. And the shift of like, just if you need me, send a note, right? I check on you a couple times a week to make sure your ball is
Yeah,
bouncing how we've tried to make it bounce. And if it works, great, right? But just if you need me, just send me a text, right? If
yeah,
you really need me, fire off a call, right? But it's weird to sit tight on an email. I used to actually do this as a professor, where a lot of professors on Friday at 5 they shut their emails off. And I said to my students, I'm like, if I'm not replying to you on a weekend when I've given you a 14,000 word assignment, jokingly speaking here, right? But then I haven't done my part as your professor to not be accessible. So you're going to work on this over Saturday and Sunday. And if you have questions about what the paper is about or what the assignment's about, and I'm not replying back to you, then it's not fair of me to be trying to teach you and try to guide you into greater scope of what you're learning in our industry. So I was always accessible, and I've always ran my life like the restaurant life, where it's like Sunday at 2, yeah, you can send me a message, you'll hear back, right? It just the world is ticking, and hospitality is alive and always ticking, right? And if we're not actively a part of it, or getting our team to be
yeah.
actively a part of it based upon what we've taught them to do, and grown them, right? Then we
Right.
lose essence of just being the only one in the room that's trying to lead it.
I can respect that. I also would probably like if that's me, I'm probably going to say on the weekend you'll get a response from me, but it's not going to be immediate. Right? It's gonna fit within the context of my own freedom. Um,
Well, it's funny because I used to have 9 different like notes that were made as responses to guests. So that if a guest emailed me on my day off, which was usually Monday, Tuesday, is that if the president of Mercedes needed a reservation at my restaurant and I didn't answer on the Monday and Tuesday, the secretary at Mercedes has no idea, and she's just going to go and try to find a booking somewhere else. And I would
right.
immediately answer and my wife was like, "Do you always have to answer this on your days off?" I'm like, "Yeah, because we can't lose things. They don't know how we operate." But I've got 9 perfectly done guest responses that were just a drop and paste, and then a quick personalized to the first name and the company name. And Joe was like, "Oh,
I
that was
might,
quick." And I was like,
yeah,
7 emails, and it took me 14
I
minutes.
might challenge that in saying, is there anybody else that can do that work? And is that the highest value work that you can possibly be doing for your organization?
Oh, in today's society, absolutely not. Back then, it was.
Right. Well,
There, things,
oh, how much we've learned, right?
things are evolving. Things are always evolving, right? Yeah, yeah, it's great, man. It's
All
amazing. I
right.
think there's such an impact.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Tell me what a win in your day is. Like what is like if there's a win and a lose, what's a win?
You know what? my wife has been back home taking care of her mom who was in hospital, and now back home for the last couple of weeks, and is there for another couple of weeks. And today the win was her knowing when she's coming home, and she's like, I'm going to plan for the 12th, and I was like, dynamite. And that's been the biggest positive of my day today. Is I keep texting her. I was like, I just can't wait to get into mischief with you again. Like, we've been together 20 years, and that's my biggest win today. Was that I know there's an end to what's been very much the necessity of what has been needed, but she's done so
Right.
much work to get her mom feeling good and getting back on track, and the nurses and doctors and so on. But my win was knowing when she's coming home, and that was
Nice.
everything. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
And the lose for the day, I haven't had a loss today.
Oh no, I don't want to know what the lose for the day is. I
Oh,
like
it's fun.
wins.
And it's funny the little things in life that you pay attention to think maybe there's going to be a speed bump that shows up. So my wife's got this amazing cookie business up here, and I was doing farmers markets this past 2 weekends because I had just enough doughs. I had almost 600 doughs that I was like, I can crush 6 markets, but we need a friend of ours to help out. And I was so proud of how focused I was on achieving this over the last 2 weeks that on Saturday morning when I picked up our friend Omema, I said, you know what's funny? I said I feel really proud right now of how much things have worked. Like, I've been focused and aligned, and just priorities have been exactly where they need to be. And I said out loud, I said, because I haven't said this out loud yet, I said, but I wait for a speed bump to show up that I see how I grab it and what it does for me. And very simply, as I dropped her off at one farmer's market, I went to another one. I opened up our count sheets and our float sheets, and I had accidentally put them in opposite bins. And I had this whole moment where I was like, did I miscount our cookie counts going to the markets? Like, what did I do? And then I realized that I had just accidentally put them in each other's bins. And I sent her this text that I was like, well, if anxiety could ever kick in from the conversation we just had in the car, this was what happened. And then I realized it wasn't anything big of a deal any means, and that it couldn't be something that would rattle my day because it really wasn't a big deal. But for a moment, I was like, the world's ending.
Yep.
And
Sky
she
is
was
falling.
like, you're good, calm down, you're good, you're good, right? Like, good. And I was like, but if that was the worst thing that happened to me today, it's okay, right? I was oddly prepared for anything else that could come my way.
Awesome.
So I look at and anything that might show up as a loss in my day as the opportunity for it to be a win tomorrow. And I think one big thing that I'd always learned in my life, and this was after I had, originally quit drinking 8 years ago. I had slipped with wine again because I thought I had control over it. But it's been just over 8 years since I've had a sip of hard alcohol or beer, and it'll be 3 years in September since I've had a sip of wine. And
Oh,
I overconfidently started asking every question that came to my thought when I was working with clients, or when I was working with, my role as a restaurant with my partners, or so on, was always ask a question, because there's a 50-50 shot you're going to get the answer that you want. And if you don't get the answer that you want, then there's still a 50% chance to reframe that question or redevelop that question to potentially get the answer that you were hoping for. And that it allowed me to start pausing and stepping back and going, I actually think this really makes sense for what we're doing. Let me position it a different way. And it changed the way I thought things out. Was that I think there's more vulnerability out there for us ourselves, is that when we become more transparent for ourselves to think things out, and that it empowers our teams when we put that transparency out in the world, that
right.
a loss that shows up can turn into a win if you rethink what that loss looked like based upon how it came at you, by just taking a pause and resetting, and kind of rinse, reset, reset, repeat, and just allowing not the anxiety to win, but more of the cognitive ability to think it out win. And that every loss has a chance to be a win. And if it is going to maintain
Nice.
as a loss, then just park it, put it aside, right? Move along. There's other wins out there for you to grab.
Yeah. I'm pretty fond of saying today's screw up is tomorrow's focus. Right?
Right. And you know what?
What?
Nothing changes when you've worked a 14-hour day and then you fall asleep and you wake up fresh and go, wait a minute. Hold on. Got it. I know why that looked like that yesterday, but I understand how it can look today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also challenge my teams that when we make the big mistakes, like try to understand the root cause, not just the symptoms. Like, let's get back. Why did that screw up? Oh, because we were pushing too hard. Yes. Oh, we were doing too much, or I waited too long. Yeah. What was the root cause? Yup. Find the solution and then like let's just learn from it. Too many times I think it's easy to lay blame on things, and it's like, if we're not making mistakes, how are we going to learn anyway? Perfect is
Well, that's
boring.
exactly it, right? That's it, right? Well, and I think there's more of a wholesomeness to it when we think about conflict management rather than conflict resolution. Because if we're going to get stuck in these moments of trying to resolve the problems in the middle of the moment rather than managing them, then it just, my goodness, right? Like we'll do better things by getting ourselves out of the thinking of it when we can manage situations rather than having to resolve situations that can maybe be done later on if they need to be. But I think it changes the tone when you can manage these opportunities. Um, and yeah, a team that's in the grind, my goodness, I've seen uh, the world of chefs and my wife was a chef. She did her culinary and pastry diplomas at the Culinary Institute of Canada. That was her education. So she's trained in both aspects of it. And it's neat to have worked with her in a restaurant. But her being a business owner and running our cookie business out of our fully licensed home kitchen, um, when the punk music goes on, she's in work mode. And I'm like, got it. And I'm trying to do client meetings with punk music going on upstairs. And I'm like, but I know where she's in work mode and I know she's in chef mode. And the mentality is just the grind because I don't know how to put things together. I can cook, but I'm not a chef, right? And so when I watch it in the intensity of the chef life, and every chef's going to go, how hard was your day? I'm like, I get it, right? I dealt with some madness in the dining room. However, right, I get that you overcooked 12 steaks because your mindset wasn't there and you went into a spiral down and couldn't find the and it took the next day to kind of have it kick in. Yeah, I applaud the chef world incredibly.
Yeah. Nowadays I ask questions like, so do you think that your employee cooks better steaks when they're stressed? And that stops people because it's like, huh? Because I don't know where I come from. My grandparents on my mother's side, they're from Mexico, so like there's chili sauces and things. And the old fashioned rule is you don't let anybody make spicy things when they're pissed off. Think about that for a second, right? Because you're gonna
Ah,
you're gonna hurt. And so I've taken that to being like, huh? Do does any cook does anybody apply their craft better when they're like angry and stressed? No. I don't know. Maybe, but maybe I feel like a carpenter's gonna bang harder and like bend the nail. I feel like the chef or the saucier is gonna make something just a little bit too bitter when he's pissed off, you know. Um
I
so
have a
I
question for
try to
you.
find people ways to like come back to center. Like how do we put that how do we put all the bullshit aside? Like, do you need to go outside or go in the walk-in and scream and get rid of that? Do you need to make the phone call that resolves the argument with your girlfriend now? Like, do you need to do that?
Yeah.
Because I can handle your station. Go and figure your shit out for a minute and then come back
Go find,
because we got work
go
to do.
find your harmony. Go find your harmony.
Gotta find the harmony, man. Gotta find the
So here's my
resonant notes.
question. I have a chef question, a food chef question.
Talk to me.
Do you do you think beef cows that are treated in a very healthy and well and nurturing lifestyle versus those that have been raised in more of an angst lifestyle, do you think their beef tastes different?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I
If
find
it starts
that
at the source,
what's that?
right? Okay, so if it starts at the direct source of when that steak's
Yeah.
going on a grill, is the steak tougher today because the stress of the cow existed? Or is the
Yeah.
steak beautifully balanced because the cow was treated with way more graciousness and humanity, right? So it's exactly it. Is that the hot sauce is going to be a little bit more zippy, right? If you're
Yeah.
stressed and angry,
Yeah.
so it's like, what's another tablespoon of chilies, right? Well, right, as a bald man,
Oof.
my head just starts to get a little warm.
Right. Well, awesome. Chris,
Awesome.
thank you so much
Great
for
chat.
joining us today. We
Thanks for
covered
having
some
me, man. This
ground
is
there,
great.
buddy. I
Awesome,
love
dude.
it.
Amazing.
For all you out there, you can find us on YouTube. You can find Culinary Mechanic wherever you consume your podcasts. Please like, follow, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review because it matters. The message is getting out there, and I appreciate it. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us in the sandbox. I appreciate it. I will make sure that people can find you in the show notes.
Fabulous.
The McFadden group, I assume you're on LinkedIn on a fairly regular basis. We'll make sure they can find you, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Thank you,
Yep.
Sam. Thanks, Jeff.
You've been listening to Culinary Mechanic. This show exists to help you lead with more clarity, build systems that actually work, and create a kitchen culture worth showing up for. If this episode helped you move even one step in that direction, do me a favor, leave a quick review. It helps more chefs and operators stop the chaos and start leading with intention.